Hi, my name is Theodore Cottingham with the School of God in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, USA. And I'm making this video for you, not because I want you to follow me, but because I want you to know there's a high cost to know God. You can follow God as you want to and however you define that, because you're the judge. You're in control of you. You are answerable to you and you only. For when you know all things, you will know the real you, the non-molecular you, the transcendent you is God. And what God is made up of all of the one mind, of all of the consciousness of Christ, who have matured to be one mind of throughout the cosmos. And we are not powerless. But to know these things and more, you grow them within you. You hear the word. You may hear truth. You will hear truth from me and others, some. And you will hear truth in you, some. And you learn to discern and you choose. And each day as you choose, you will grow the tree of life within you that's between your ears. You need to know there's a high cost to knowing God. And those who preach otherwise haven't paid the cost. The cost is time. T-I-M-E, time. Surrender. Completion. God doesn't come like we've been taught. God doesn't act on your behalf like we've been told so many times. I'm asking you to mature. It's a growing process. It's a learning process. It's a process of education, growth, and becoming a new creation. Because when you want to know God, you are going to begin to meet the real you. Not the flesh you with a mechanical mind. Not the programmed you by others' words. But when you see God, truly face to face, you will see God in your mirror. You will be it. And you will have learned to grow up, to accept it, and become it. For God will teach you this internally. So I put on this title, The Cost to Know God. So many people say they can't hear God. You may pray to God, but where is God? Is God answering you? Is God speaking with you every day? And if you think God is speaking, are you writing it down? Carefully, valuing the paper that you write on. dating every page and numbering the pages? Will you take time to do so? Many years ago, as I began to want to know God for myself, I began to pray. And as I began to really pray continuously, consistently, to know God, I asked certain things, I would question things, I would speak things. So there was all of this body of words that I had spoken, wanting to know God, communicating with God. I felt like I had to decide what I believed apart from anyone else and apart from anything else. And I went through a period of time not looking to any writing or any book or anything anybody had said, but dealing with what do I really believe. And it was a process of months with great rigor and attention, with many questions. I wanted to get it down on paper, what I really believed. And I wanted to get it down to like the lowest common denominator. I wanted to get it down into the smallest kernel of truth. And finally, I decided, for me, what I decided. First, God exists. That was number one. I decided there was a power, an entity, a something that was greater than me, that I felt like I wanted to know. The second thing I decided, God communicates. And the third thing I decided, if I'm not hearing God, it's not God's fault. So many people feel like they're waiting on God. But I assure you, God's waiting on them. God's waiting on you. God's waiting on you to hear. You can say you're listening, but are you really listening, or are you defeating the voice of God in you? Because when it comes, it's not about what you prayed about the way you want to hear. It's not what you want to hear. So back to my praying to know God. Over a period of time, one day I heard within me, there's a wrench in your garage. Doesn't belong to you. And that was correct. And I thought, it registered with me. That's correct. And I was suddenly challenged. I had been in the Air Force, an aircraft mechanic of all things. And when I was discharged, there was a particular wrench that I kept because it facilitated me changing the oil in my motorcycle. And I knew they didn't care, they wouldn't miss it. And so I had it, and I use it occasionally for that purpose. And here I am. I'm dealing with the aspect. I want to know God. I don't want to play. I want to know. I know there's a cost. I will pay it. I don't know what it is. But anyway, that's another story. So I thought, all of a sudden, for days I thought, okay, I've got this wrench in my garage. It's not mine. Basically, I stole it. It was wrong to steal it. Well, I need to make it right. So finally, I wrote a letter to the U.S. Air Force, to the base that I was on at the time. And I told them that I had kept that wrench and I was sorry. That I had decided I wanted to know God and I felt like God had spoken to me about it. And I was very sorry. And if I needed to pay anything, do anything else, I'd let me know. And I put it in a box and I mailed it to them. But that was just the beginning. So sometime later, here I am again, every day praying, pouring my heart out to God, wanting to know God. And I felt like God spoke to me and said, you remember a certain client that I did work for? You did inferior work. And it was a stumbling block. So I got to thinking about that. And it was a real stretch. I shouldn't have taken on that work. I was not qualified for that particular work for that client. But I tried to do it as best I could with other help. And I did a poor job. And I admit it. But see, I've had to come to the place that, yep, I did. So now what do I do about it? I called him up. I learned that he was very ill. So I went to see his son. And I told him, I said, I'm very sorry. This is where I am and this is why I'm here. I'm sorry. It's been a long time ago, but I think I recall he actually knew that situation. So here I am, daily, continuing. I want to know God. And all of a sudden, I'm faced with a client telling me things that if I do work for them, it affects everything. And finally, I said, I cannot do that work for you. And I began to think in these terms of listening. And the more I prayed to know God, that client left. I had another client left. It wasn't long before another client left. And the more I prayed to seek to know God, the less income I had. But I trusted. Somehow I continued. Other clients came to mind that over the years I had overcharged. And I contacted more than one and said, I'm sorry. This is where I am. This is what I'm dealing with. And I overcharged you. And some of them I actually paid back over time, which was hard. My income was going down, and here my liability for work I had done in the past, I'm refunding. But I wanted to know God. But there's a cost to knowing God. You don't just say a little prayer, suddenly become a new creation. You grow it over time. You learn the rapport of God. As you become intimate with God, you learn the values of God. And God values your word and your ethics and your integrity. And I'm telling you, that's the bedrock. You don't build a second floor on a vacant lot. This is why I'm sharing with you. I don't think it's taught. I certainly wasn't taught it. And so many are teaching great prosperity. Come to God, do this, do that, and you will this, that, and the other. I spent many an hour on my knees, thousands of hours in Bible study and studying and trying to know. I wanted to know God. I didn't want to know about God. I wanted to know God. And this is how God began to deal with me. The value of my word. And it spread into all sorts of other aspects of my life. I began to become aware my son or daughter might call me and on an afternoon and say, or whatever, and I'd say, I'll be home at 6. Okay. Well, for years, that was just a target. And all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute. I told my family I would be there at 6. And all of a sudden, punctuality became a major deal to keep my word. And I became a lot more careful about recognizing that. And even with clients, what I could produce, when I could produce it. And how I said, I'll be home at 6. Or whatever. You see, it's the integrity of your word. Because your word is what grows you. Your word crowns you with wisdom and loving kindness. Or it keeps you in separation from the knowledge of God. This is important. I hope I'm communicating. You who are listening, I thank you. Whoever you are, wherever you are. Thank you. I honor you. Care about your words and your ethics and the integrity of the king. Because in this process, as you get to know God, you are kinging the king. That's the real you. The you that is not molecular. And if you want to be born again, a new creation of, instead of just the words and the definitions that are so commonly spouted. If you want to become a new creation and operate in your power of love, there's a high cost. And that cost is time. That cost is deciding that you want to decide what you believe for yourself. I suggest you decide you want to hear God teach you directly. I encourage you to. then you're not pointing at someone else. There's nobody making you do this. You decide. And eventually, no matter what you pointed to in the past or valued, you can't blame it or credit it because you are the judge of you. You see, the separation from God is not some male entity in the heavens. God is I am, and I am is a race of light beings. The real you, what you use every day to walk around in this flesh, is the power of God that you are using. So these eyes in these sockets of your head, do they give you sight or do they take it from you? If you're born again, I assure you, you can see a lot more than the visible, empirical reality. So we're born into this state. We have come here in this state. And how we got here is another story, but we're here. It's not how do we escape. It's who are we? And when we begin to come to our senses, it's proper, appropriate, and I encourage you to begin asking more and more questions. And don't expect answers to the hard questions to come from other religious leaders. Go to God and decide you're going to find out for yourself. God will teach you directly about all things. But God doesn't answer like you and I have a conversation. You ask me, what did you do yesterday? How are you? What's your education? What's this, that, or the other? Have you written a book? Sometimes I've experienced that. Rarely. And yet, I have written thousands of pages of words that God has given me. But I go throughout a day. And throughout a given day and night, we have many thoughts toward God, many questions about this, that, and the other. And then each day for me, I would consistently come and surrender, and I would let God speak. And God would speak sometimes about the things that I was asking here and there. But it was after some of the foundation was beginning to be built. You see, I decided I didn't know what the cost was to know God, but there must be some. So, of course, there's this Bible story about a woman who pours the oil over the feet. Precious ointment, expensive things. What do we value? If you look at that little story, consider that expensive ointment, time. To know God, there's time. It cost you. And it costs more than you know. But what do we receive So many times, as I begin to experience writing the first person words of God each day, so many times I would cry. I had no idea. I had no precedent for what I was experiencing. The love of God, the tenderness, the way, the gentleness, even as God would correct me, tell me I was wrong, tell me this, that, and the other. The gentleness was beyond somehow what I can articulate at the moment. Be not afraid of God. Do not fear God. Do not fear falling into the hands of an angry God or experiencing the wrath of God. For that God is not your God if you're seeking what I'm speaking about. I'm talking about God of light, God of love. And there's no slaughter, and there's no wrath. And the way you deal with God of light, the God of love, is surrender. Surrender to what? Surrender to listen. And it takes time to listen. And it takes time to write those words. Why do you want to write them? To study them. Because God will begin speaking in a stream to you. For 30 minutes? For an hour? And when that stream begins to come, it's not linear. It's layered. The message is almost like a mosaic. It's like a puzzle. You put it together. At least that's my experience. So many people, as soon as they begin to read some of the words that God has given me, because it's not just like the Wall Street Journal or something. It's not like their local newspaper with formatted paragraphs and dictionary grammar that they expect. They don't know what to do with it. That's not God. God will teach you, but it's not like you think. There's a cost, and that cost is time. That cost is caring about your word, and it's action on your part. There's action on your part to know God. Pick up your pen and let God speak with you every day. Day after day, whether you hear anything or not. And you will. And it will come. And as time goes on, it will come when you least expect it. Driving down Lewis Avenue in Tulsa. More than once, all of a sudden, I pulled off, grabbed my yellow tablet and pen and started writing. And this is how I learned to become who I am. I have written. I have listened. I have learned. I have acted willingly, many times without much wisdom. I bumbled along the best I could, but here I am. God is waiting on you. You are not waiting on God. Everything I'm doing is about leadership. To know God, you come into your leadership. You learn to lead. And it's not easy, but it's doable, of course. When you want to know God more than anything else, the joy of God in communicating will become very evident. And the tenderness of love that you exchange in the words and the presence will be more than worth it all. God will teach you directly, and that is the message, and that there is a high cost. Don't expect things to be like they've been taught you or that you have read about. Be open to the new things God is doing today and the development of the Christ consciousness for all to be Christ again in your shoes so that you're it and you know it. You are the son, you are the daughter, and you are not unequal with God. But our consciousness has robbed us from it. Religion, the programming, ignorance. But God is not only willing to teach you, God is willing to give you what you need to help you through this process. And believe me, it's not all glory to glory in some euphoric meeting or an increasing paycheck. My income went down, 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 down. I didn't understand. What you go through may be very different, but at least you'll know. If you want to know my story, at least you'll know. So I share some of these things. I ask you to care about you. This is about you. This is about leadership. And maybe I think I'm about done, but I want to say, you are the most important person in your world. And all the world needs you, but all the world needs the real you. And the real you is found by you, not at the foot of the cross, but where you surrender to learn. Because there's no joy in creating a bunch of followers who never grow up, who never become born again to heal the world, who don't even know what the kingdom of God is, much less that they are it. People dying right and left who don't know they are God, that God is their parent. They never know the vast opportunity that was before them. But you do. I hope you do. I pray you do. And who do I pray to? You. What is prayer? Communication, request, petition, whatever you see. I'm asking you to come to God humbly and listen with your pen in hand and let God talk with you. I've mentioned 2 a.m. before. There was a time God asked me to get up. Said, will you meet me at 2 a.m.? So many times I set the alarm and got up where I could hardly walk straight. I was so sleepy. stumble into the den, pick up my pen, later pick up my recorder and record, and then get up at 6 to try to be at early morning prayer. I'm not pointing to me. I'm saying there's a cost. And whatever your cost is will be yours. I don't know your cost. I don't know your path. We are all unique. And the more we surrender our mind, our intelligence, our time, the more the consciousness of Christ will be formed in us that conform us not to the image of flesh, but the image of God to become it. And more we will begin to walk in our power and begin to heal people, operating with integrity. Don't lie, cheat, or steal. Period. Okay, I love you. Come into the fullness of knowing who you are. Accept your leadership. And don't be afraid of your power. Your power is great. But every person must learn. Every person who comes into the kingdom must learn not to use that power, but to operate in love that permeates all that we do. I love you. My name is Theodore Cottingham, and this is the School of God in Eureka Springs. Asking you to seek God, to write the first person words of God, to learn to speak them and value them above life. And your life will change. It may cost you in ways that you don't know. Probably so. But this is the path of God that I know, and this is the God that I know that comes in love and touches tenderly. There's no wrath in the God. There's no slaughter in the God that I know. And the God that I know operates as one, not with the God of wrath. We're all connected. But we are pruning the tree of life in this process. I love you. Thank you for being a part of the School of God if you choose. Thank you so much for listening, sharing these words. Most of all, become who you really are. Your power is vast. You are infinite and immortal. The knowledge of God is all between your ears being released. I thank you again. Write me at Box 34 if you like. I'm in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. I'm interested in your comments and questions. If they're sincere, if they're thought out, if you're diligently seeking God to know God. I have many things online. Many. All of those first 2,400 lessons are online. You can find the link on the School of God website. You can search them. A lot of them are shocking. God will teach you how to hang planets in space if you're willing. But you begin with your word. You begin with your integrity. You begin with kindness to each other. love your kids, love each other, and we will all be known by our love. Thank you again so very much. I'm going now. Good day.